They called him a danger, a threat to their quiet street, but this hero dog had saved lives, a national champion. Now his owner, a dedicated firefighter, faces an impossible choice from her own neighbors. You won't believe how one woman and her loyal canine ignited a firestorm against injustice. Don't miss what happens next. He's a menace, Joanna, a ticking time bomb in our peaceful neighborhood. Donnie Mills's voice, sharp and reedy, sliced through the crisp October air of Missoula. He stood on Joanna Parks's porch, his finger jabbing toward Blaze, who sat calmly by Joanna's side, his intelligent Malinois eyes fixed on the agitated man. Joanna, fresh from a morning run with Blaze, her blonde ponytail still damp and her athletic frame radiating energy, felt a familiar weariness settle over her. At 29, a firefighter used to confronting chaos. She found these neighborhood skirmishes orchestrated by Donnie, her 43-year-old neighbor and overzealous HOA board member, uniquely draining. Donnie, we've been over this, she said, her voice even but firm. Blaze is a trained rescue dog. He's more disciplined than most people I know. Trained to do what? Mauling children? Digging up petunias? Donnie's face, usually pale, was flushed. He clutched a sheaf of papers, undoubtedly the latest HOA complaint form, filled with his spidery, indignant script. Mrs. Henderson saw him barking at a squirrel yesterday. A squirrel, it was aggressive. She said, traumatized her cat. Joanna bit back a sigh. Blaze, a veteran of 3 national disaster deployments, a dog who had calmly navigated collapsed buildings and their raging floodwaters to find survivors, was being painted as a suburban terror because he barked at a squirrel. He's a Donnie, dogs bark, and Mrs. Henderson's cat, from what I recall, enjoys taunting him from the safety of her window. Blaze, as if sensing the tension, let out a soft whine and nudged Joanna's hand with his wet nose. She stroked his head, his coarse fur a comfort. His presence was a grounding force in her life, especially after long, grueling shifts at the fire station. He wasn't just a pet, he was a partner, a hero, a silent confidant who understood the unspoken burdens of her job. Donnie, however, was immune to Blaze's stoic charm. His fear of dogs was well known, a phobia that seemed to fuel his vendetta against Blaze in particular. This isn't just about barking, Joanna. It's about safety. It's about community standards. The HOA has received multiple complaints. Multiple complaints from you, Donnie, Joanna corrected, and perhaps one from Mrs. Henderson, after you likely coached her. His eyes narrowed. Are you questioning my integrity? I am a respected member of this community, a pillar of the Homeowners Association. He puffed out his chest, the HOA bylaws practically radiating from his pores. And the HOA board has decided this is an official notice. He thrust the papers at her. You have 30 days to rehome the animal. Failure to comply will result in fines, and eventually further action to remove the nuisance. Joanna's blood ran cold. Rehome Blaze? The words felt like a physical blow. She took the papers, her hand trembling slightly. You can't be serious, Donnie. Rehome Blaze? He's a hero. He's saved lives. He has commendations. For God's sake. Commendations don't make him any less of a large, potentially dangerous dog in a neighborhood with children and elderly folks, Donnie retorted, his voice laced with a smug satisfaction. The bylaws are clear. Animals deemed a nuisance or a threat by the board must be removed, and the board has deemed him so. It was a unanimous vote, I'll have you know. A chill deeper than the Montana autumn settled over Joanna. Unanimous? She knew some of the other board members. Had Donnie managed to poison them all against Blaze? Or were they simply too cowed by his relentless campaigning? This is absurd, she managed, her voice tight with disbelief and rising anger. Blaze has never shown an ounce of aggression towards any person. He's a certified search and rescue canine. He works with the fire department, with FEMA. Perhaps he's fine in a disaster zone. Donnie sniffed, unimpressed. But this is Primrose Lane, Missoula. We have standards, and your beast doesn't meet them. He gave Blaze a look of profound distaste. Blaze merely tilted his head, his ears perked, a picture of canine curiosity. The injustice of it clawed at Joanna. Blaze, who had once spent 72 grueling hours searching for survivors in the rubble of a collapsed apartment building after an earthquake in California, who had located a lost child in the dense forests of the Bitterroot Range, was being condemned by a man whose greatest civic contribution was measuring lawn heights and policing recycling bin etiquette. "I'm not getting rid of my dog, Donnie," Joanna stated, her blue eyes, usually warm and empathetic, now glinting with a steely resolve that surprised even herself. This wasn't just about Blaze, it was about principle. It was about standing up to a bully who cloaked his personal vendettas in the guise of community rules. Donnie's smugness faltered slightly at her direct defiance. "You'll regret this, Joanna. The HOA has resources. We will enforce the bylaws." He adjusted his glasses, a nervous tick she'd noticed before. "This is for the good of the community." "The community?" Joanna's voice rose. "The community relies on first responders like me, and on K9s like Blaze. He's more of an asset to this community than you'll ever be, with your petty complaints and your rulebook." The barb hit its mark. Donnie's face purpled. "You'll be hearing from our lawyer," he sputtered, then turned on his heel and marched stiffly down her porch steps, nearly tripping over a decorative pumpkin. Joanna watched him go, her heart pounding. She sank onto the porch swing, Blaze immediately resting his head in her lap, his warm breath puffing against her jeans. She looked down at the official HOA letter, the cold, bureaucratic language a stark contrast to the living, breathing hero at her feet. 30 days, she whispered, burying her face in Blaze's soft fur. "What are we going to do, boy?" Blaze whined again, licking her hand as if to say, "We'll figure it out. We always do." But this wasn't a burning building or a lost hiker. This was a war of attrition, fought with bylaws and veiled threats, in the quiet, tree-lined streets of her own neighborhood. And Joanna knew, with a sinking feeling, that Donnie Mills was a man who relished a fight, especially one he thought he could win by wielding the petty power of the HOA. The problem had officially begun, not with a bang, but with a typed letter and the self-righteous indignation of a man who feared what he didn't understand. The peaceful life she'd tried to build in Missoula, a refuge from the high-stakes drama of her profession, had just been invaded. And the first casualty, if Donnie had his way, would be her most loyal companion. The 30-day deadline loomed over Joanna like a Montana thunderhead, dark and threatening. The official HOA letter, pinned to her fridge beneath a magnet shaped like a fire hydrant, was a constant, sickening reminder of the battle she faced. Sleep became a luxury, her nights punctuated by anxious thoughts and the sudden, reassuring snores of Blaze beside her bed. During the day, a knot of dread tightened in her stomach every time she saw Donnie Mills meticulously tending his perfect lawn, his smug glances her way, a clear signal that he was relishing her distress. Joanna wasn't one to back down from a fight, especially not when it involved Blaze. Her first move was to appeal directly to the other HOA board members. She knew a few of them casually: Miss Henderson, a retired history teacher who always had a kind word; Sarah Klein, a busy mom of 3 who often complimented Blaze's gentle nature when they met in the park. She typed up a carefully worded letter, outlining Blaze's extensive training, his service record, and included copies of his certifications and commendations from national SAR, search and rescue organizations. She even got a glowing letter of support from her fire captain, praising Blaze's invaluable contributions and unwavering temperament. The responses, when they came, were disheartening. Mr. Henderson expressed sympathy but explained, in a somewhat apologetic phone call, that Donnie had presented compelling arguments about liability and maintaining neighborhood harmony. He'd also subtly hinted at Donnie's relentless lobbying, wearing down the other members. Sarah Klein sent a brief, non-committal email stating the board had made its decision based on the information available and the established bylaws. It became chillingly clear Donnie had successfully framed Blaze as a threat, and the other board members, whether through conviction, intimidation, or sheer apathy, were unwilling to challenge him. The impact rippled through Joanna's life. Walks with Blaze, once a source of joy and relaxation, now felt fraught with tension. She found herself constantly scanning for Donnie, for disapproving glares from other neighbors. Some, who used to greet her warmly, now offered only curt nods or avoided eye contact altogether. It was as if an invisible line had been drawn in the sand, and she and Blaze were on the wrong side of it. The easy camaraderie of the neighborhood was fracturing, poisoned by Donnie's campaign. Even at the fire station, where Blaze was a beloved mascot and a respected colleague, the stress was taking its toll on Joanna. Her crew noticed her uncharacteristic quietness, the shadows under her eyes. "You okay, Parks?" her captain asked one day, after a routine drill where she'd seemed distracted. Joanna hesitated, then poured out the whole sordid story. The captain, a man who had seen Blaze pull a child from a smoke-filled apartment, listened with growing incredulity and anger. "That's outrageous," he boomed. "An HOA telling a firefighter they can't keep a certified hero canine? In Missoula? This town loves its heroes, human and canine." He offered to speak to the HOA himself, but Joanna, while grateful, knew it might only escalate things if Donnie felt his authority was being challenged by an outsider. The first official fine notice arrived a week later, tucked under her doormat. $50 for failure to comply with neighborhood regulations regarding animal nuisances. It felt like a slap in the face. She paid it, but the act left a bitter taste in her mouth. This wasn't about money, it was about the principle, the sheer injustice of it. The escalation came sooner than she expected, and in a way that blindsided her. One crisp Saturday morning, Joanna was in her backyard, throwing a ball for Blaze. It was their sacred time, a moment of normalcy in the growing storm. Blaze, a blur of focused energy, leaped and twisted, catching the ball with athletic grace. Suddenly, Joanna heard a high-pitched yelp, followed by a child's cry, from the other side of the tall wooden fence separating her yard from the Petersons. New residents who had moved in a month ago. Before Joanna could react, the Petersons' back door flew open and Mrs. Peterson rushed out, scooping up a small, whimpering child. Donnie Mills, who seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to appear wherever trouble brewed, was suddenly at the fence line, peering over. "What happened?" Joanna called out, her heart sinking. Blaze, sensing the distress, had stopped playing and stood alert, whining softly. "Your dog!" Mrs. Peterson shrieked, her voice hysterical. "Your vicious dog bit my Timmy!" Joanna's blood ran cold. "What? Blaze didn't. He wouldn't." She looked at Blaze, who was still on her side of the fence, looking confused and concerned. There was no way he could have reached the child. Donnie, however, seized the moment. "I saw it all," he declared, his voice ringing with a perverse triumph. The beast lunged at the fence. He practically tore a hole through it to get at the boy. "That's impossible," Joanna protested, rushing to the fence. There was no hole, no damage, just the solid wood. "Blaze was with me, in the middle of the yard." But Mrs. Peterson, understandably distraught, wasn't listening. Little Timmy was crying, pointing a finger with a small scratch toward Joanna's yard. "Bad doggy," he wailed. The situation rapidly deteriorated. An animal control officer was called. Protocols were followed. Blaze was examined, his demeanor noted as calm and non-aggressive. There was no evidence on him, no blood, no displaced fur, the scratch on Timmy's finger. The officer noted privately to Joanna, looked more like something he could have gotten from the rough wood of the fence itself, or a dozen other things in a typical backyard. But the accusation had been made. Donnie was ecstatic. "This is it, Joanna!" he crowed later that day, finding her as she was bringing in her trash cans. "A documented attack. The HOA will have no choice now but to pursue immediate removal. You've endangered a child. Your precious hero dog is a menace." Just like I said. Joanna felt a wave of despair wash over her. It was a setup. She was sure of it, but how could she prove it? Mrs. Peterson was hysterical, and Donnie was a master manipulator. The documented attack, however flimsy, was a powerful weapon in his hands. He had his twist, his escalation, and he was going to use it to drive Blaze out. That evening, as Joanna sat with Blaze, his head once again resting on her lap, she felt the walls closing in. The support she had hoped for hadn't materialized in any meaningful way. The system, embodied by the HOA and fueled by Donnie's fear and malice, seemed rigged against them. She'd provided facts, commendations, letters of support. It hadn't been enough. Now there was an accusation of biting, however baseless. The stress was immense, not just for her, but she could see it in Blaze too. He was more subdued, his usually right eyes carrying a hint of worry, as if he understood the precariousness of their situation. The fight had just gotten exponentially harder, and the thought of losing Blaze, of him being labeled vicious, was a wound far deeper than any finer neighborhood censure. This was no longer just about bylaws, it was about Blaze's reputation, his very existence in their home. The documented attack was a poisoned arrow, and Donnie Mills had aimed it with malicious precision. An emergency HOA meeting was convened, and despite Joanna's passionate defense and the animal control officer's report, which noted no aggressive behavior from Blaze and the inconclusive nature of the scratch, the outcome was grim. The fear, fanned by Donnie, was palpable. The board, now armed with what they considered a concrete incident, issued a final notice. Blaze was to be removed from the community within 7 days, or the HOA would initiate legal proceedings to have him forcibly removed, and Joanna would bear all associated costs. 7 days. The words echoed in the sterile formality of the HOA's letter. Joanna felt a cold dread seep into her bones, a feeling of helplessness she hadn't experienced since her rookie days facing her first uncontrolled Blaze. She looked at Blaze, who lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws, his deep brown eyes watching her with unwavering loyalty. How could she fail him? Her first desperate move was to try and reason with Mrs. Peterson. She found her in her front yard a couple of days later, watching Timmy, who was happily chasing butterflies, the supposed trauma of the dog attack seemingly forgotten. Joanna approached cautiously, her voice calm and gentle. "Mrs. Peterson," she began, "can we please talk about what happened? I know you were upset, but I need you to understand. Blaze would never hurt a child. He's trained to protect them." Mrs. Peterson stiffened, her gaze darting nervously towards Donnie Mills's house as if expecting him to materialize. "Mr. Mills explained everything," she said, her voice tight. "Your dog is dangerous." Timmy was terrified. Was he terrified of Blaze? Or was he startled and then perhaps scared by the adult's reactions? Joanna pressed gently. "Timmy, honey," she called softly to the boy, "do you remember the doggy from the other day? Did he bark loudly or try to get through the fence?" Timmy, innocent and unfiltered, paused his butterfly chase. He looked at Joanna, then at his mother. "Doggy was playing," he said. "He didn't bark. I touched the pointy fence and it hurt." He showed Joanna his finger, the small scratch now almost healed. "Mommy shouted." Mrs. Peterson's face flushed. She quickly pulled Timmy towards her. "He doesn't know what he's saying. He was scared." But a seed of doubt had been visibly planted. Before Mrs. Peterson could usher Timmy inside, Joanna said, "Blaze has saved children. Mrs. Peterson, he has risked his life for people. This isn't just a duo, he's a dedicated servant to this country. Mr. Mills has a personal vendetta, and he's manipulating this situation." Mrs. Peterson hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But then she shook her head. "The HOA has decided. I don't want any more trouble." She retreated indoors. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a complete dead end either. Timmy's words, however quickly dismissed by his mother, were a small crack of truth. Joanna realized then that fighting this battle on Donnie's turf, within the narrow, rule-bound confines of the HOA, was a losing proposition. Donnie had stacked the deck. He had twisted the narrative. She needed a different kind of leverage, a different arena. Her fire captain's words echoed in her mind. This town loves its heroes. Missoula was a community that valued service, courage, and fairness. The HOA, under Donnie's influence, was exhibiting none of that. A new resolve solidified within Joanna. If the HOA wouldn't listen to reason, then perhaps the wider community would. She spent the next 2 days meticulously compiling a dossier. It wasn't just Blaze's commendations and service records anymore. It was a story. She included photos of Blaze in action during rescue operations, covered in dust, wading through water, comforting survivors. She included testimonials not just from her captain, but from people whose lives Blaze had touched, people he had found. She wrote a detailed account of Donnie Mills's escalating harassment, his documented fear of dogs, and the flimsy, coached nature of the complaints. She included Timmy's innocent admission about the pointy fence. Then, with a deep breath, she took a step that felt both daunting and liberating. She contacted a young, ambitious journalist at the Missoula Independent, a local newspaper known for its investigative pieces and community focus. She laid out the entire story, her voice passionate but clear, backed by her folder of evidence. The journalist, initially skeptical of what might have seemed like a typical neighborhood dispute, grew increasingly engaged as Joanna detailed Blaze's incredible career and the specifics of the HOA's actions. The idea of a national hero dog being run out of town by a vindictive neighbor and a rigid HOA was, as the journalist put it, a story that needed to be told. Simultaneously, Joanna, with the help of a tech-savvy firefighter from her crew, created a social media page. Save Blaze the Hero Dog. They posted his story, photos, and excerpts from his commendations. They included a polite but firm call to action, asking for community support and urging people to respectfully contact the HOA board members to voice their concerns. The initial online response was a trickle, then a stream, then a flood. People were outraged. Comments poured in, "This is a disgrace. How can they do this to a hero? Donnie Mills sounds like a petty tyrant. We stand with Joanna and Blaze." Veterans groups shared the story. Animal rescue organizations picked it up. Blaze's picture, noble and steadfast, began appearing all over local social media feeds. Donnie Mills was not prepared for this kind of resistance. He expected Joanna to quietly rehome her dog or face mounting fines and legal fees. He certainly didn't expect her to shine a public spotlight on Primrose Lane and the HOA's internal workings. The shift in power was subtle at first, then undeniable. The HOA board members, who had previously hidden behind a bureaucratic procedure and Donnie's confident pronouncements, started receiving emails and phone calls, not just a few, but dozens, then hundreds. These weren't angry rants, they were heartfelt pleas from fellow Missoula residents, people who understood the value of a dog like Blaze. Some were from individuals who had been helped by SAR teams, some from other canine handlers, many simply from citizens shocked by the injustice. Mr. Henderson, the retired teacher, called Joanna. His voice was troubled. "Joanna Baum, the board is reconsidering the optics of this situation. The public reaction has been quite strong." "It's not about optics, Mr. Henderson," Joanna replied, her voice steady. "It's about right and wrong. Blaze is a hero, not a menace, and Mr. Mills has been allowed to use the HOA to pursue a personal vendetta for too long." The revelation wasn't a single, dramatic uncovering of a hidden truth, but rather the dawning realization within the community, and gradually within the HOA itself, that they had been grossly misled and were on the verge of committing a profound injustice. The power was shifting from Donnie's closed-door manipulations to the open court of public opinion. And public opinion was firmly on the side of the firefighter and her hero dog. The foundations of Donnie's campaign were crumbling, not under legal arguments, but under the weight of common decency and community outrage. Joanna had found her weapon, not in the HOA bylaws, but in the heart of her city. The Missoula Independent article landed like a bombshell. Hero K9 declared nuisance. Local firefighter fights HOA to save decorated rescue dog, screamed the headline. accompanied by a powerful photo of Joanna in her firefighter turnout gear, Blaze standing proudly by her side, his rescue vest prominent. The story, meticulously researched and compellingly written, laid bare the entire saga: Blaze's distinguished career, Donnie Mills's history of complaints and xenophobia, the flimsy evidence of the bite incident countered by Timmy's innocent words, and the HOA's heavy-handed tactics. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. What had started as a strong current of online support swelled into a tidal wave. Local radio stations picked up the story. The mayor's office issued a statement expressing concern and praising the work of Sarah Canines. Businesses offered Joanna free dog food, pet supplies, and even legal assistance. A spontaneous We Love Blaze rally was organized by a group of local veterans and animal welfare advocates, scheduled to take place outside the HOA's small community clubhouse. Donnie Mills found himself a pariah. His carefully constructed image as a diligent community guardian crumbled. Neighbors who had once tolerated his officiousness now openly avoided him or met his gaze with disapproval. His phone, which once buzzed with HOA matters he so eagerly controlled, now rang with angry citizens or hung silent. The respectable member of the community was now seen as a petty bully who had tried to drive out a genuine hero. His fear of dogs had led him to overplay his hand, and the community he claimed to protect had turned against his narrow, vindictive vision of it. The remaining HOA board members, facing unprecedented public pressure and internal fractures, convened an emergency meeting, this time without Donnie Mills initially present. The evidence Joanna had provided, now amplified by public scrutiny and the journalist's investigation, was undeniable. Mrs. Peterson, emboldened by the community support and perhaps her own conscience, pricked by her son's consistent, innocent account, submitted a written statement clarifying that she no longer believed Blaze had bitten Timmy and that her initial reaction had been fueled by panic in Mr. Mills's immediate, forceful assertions. This was the final nail in the coffin of Donnie's credibility. When Donnie was finally called into the meeting, he was no longer the confident, rule-quoting enforcer. He was pale, visibly shaken, and for once, speechless. The board, led by a newly assertive Mr. Henderson, informed him that all actions against Joanna Parks and Blaze were rescinded, effective immediately. Furthermore, they announced that the HOA would be issuing a formal public apology to Mrs. Parks and Blaze. As a final crushing blow to his ego, the board informed Donnie that they would be holding a vote of no confidence in his position on the board at their next scheduled meeting, a vote he was widely expected to lose. Joanna received the official notification the next morning. It wasn't a triumphant legal document, but a simple typed letter from the HOA. It stated that the previous notices were withdrawn, that Blaze was welcome in the community, and offered a sincere apology for the distress and unwarranted scrutiny she and Blaze had endured. Later that day, a carefully worded public apology appeared on the HOA's rudimentary website and was sent to the Missoula Independent. The We Love Blaze rally turned into a celebration. Hundreds of people, along with dozens of dogs, all leashed and well-behaved, gathered. Joanna, standing on a makeshift platform with Blaze by her fine mom, her voice thick with emotion, thanked the community. "You showed us what Missoula is truly about," she said, her gaze sweeping over the supportive faces. "It's not about petty rules and fear. It's about compassion, fairness, and recognizing the good in each other, whether human or canine." Blaze, seemingly unfazed by the adoring crowd, licked her hand, then let out a single authoritative woof that was met with cheers and laughter. Donnie Mills was not seen at the rally. Shortly after the HOA's public apology and before the vote of no confidence could take place, he quietly resigned from the board. His reign of pedantic terror was over. The for sale sign that appeared in front of his meticulously kept house a few weeks later surprised no one. His departure was as unlamented as his presence had become unwelcome. Life on Primrose Lane slowly returned to a new, better normal. Neighbors were friendlier, more united by the shared experience. Joanna and Blaze resumed their walks, No longer under a cloud of suspicion, but greeted with smiles, pats for Blaze, and genuine warmth. Mrs. Peterson, free from Donnie's influence, even struck up a tentative friendship with Joanna, and Timmy was occasionally allowed to offer Blaze a dog treat under careful supervision, his initial fear replaced by a child's natural curiosity and affection for the gentle giant. Joanna Parks had faced down a different kind of fire, one fueled by misinformation and personal animosity. She hadn't used hoses or axes, but truth, perseverance, and the courage to trust in her community. Blaze, the hero dog who had faced down dangers in disaster zones, had also weathered the storm, his status not diminished but enhanced. He remained a symbol of courage and service, a beloved member of the Missoula community, a testament to the fact that true heroism, in whatever form it takes, will ultimately be recognized and defended. The quiet street was peaceful once more, not because of rigidly enforced bylaws, but because of a renewed sense of justice and the enduring bond between a firefighter and her extraordinary dog. Joanna and Blaze's battle against a prejudiced HOA became a testament to courage and community. Their fight for justice resonated across the nation, proving that a hero's value can't be silenced by petty rules. Thank you for watching their incredible journey. Please like, subscribe, and share if you believe in standing up for what's right.